Hi, my name is Andrew Cobos, and I'm one of the lead attorneys on a case that's being called the 3M Company litigation. This is a lawsuit that is called a mass tort. It's not a class action. There are attorneys who are mistaking the two, and they are confusing the folks who are going to be a part of this action, but it's not a class action. It's a mass tort. A mass tort is where one person or one entity, in this case the 3M Company, does something that injures the other side. Now, this is an enormous mass tort action that's taking place all over the country, where U.S. combat veterans are suing a U.S.-based company for a tort that they knew about prior to sending those soldiers into combat. .3M already settled their lawsuit with the federal government for $9 million. And that was for the earplugs that the government bought. And I want to clear this up right now because there is a lot of misinformation about that settlement too. The False Claims Act lawsuit was an action on behalf of the U.S. government for saying, hey, you sold us defective earplugs and you hid that information. And 3M decided that instead of trying that case and instead of going through and putting out the evidence and attempting to vindicate themselves, that they were just going to enter into a settlement agreement and say, here's the money back. And that's what they did. Now, this is a completely separate action. That action was on behalf of the United States government. This action is on behalf of the individuals who were injured by 3M when they knew that the earplugs were defective and yet they shoveled them out anyways. So there's a lot of information out there about 3M and exactly what they knew and what they didn't know in this case. Now, I'm holding in this hand a copy of the False Claims Act complaint that the United States government filed against 3M. And I want to take a moment just to read a couple excerpts from what the federal government is saying that 3M knew about before 3M turned around and settled this case without bothering to even put up an argument as to vindication. The 3M employees were aware of the defects as early as 2000, several years before 3M and its subsidiary company became the exclusive provider of the earplugs to the military. Now let that sink in just a moment. In the year 2000, 3M knew that these earplugs right here, these earplugs had too short of a stem. This stem mechanism was defective. It was designed defectively. They knew as of 2000 that those earplugs were letting noises through. In some cases, they even knew that the earplugs amplified volume. We know that evidence exists that 3M covered up these mistakes. I can't believe that the entire time that we were fighting over in Iraq and in Afghanistan, we weren't just fighting the folks who were over there, we were fighting one of our own. And now it's time that that corporation accounts for its misdeeds. And they should be held accountable to every service member who relied on them for that equipment. War profiteers. That's what they are, and we're here to hold them accountable. I graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. I commissioned as a second lieutenant and immediately went off to Fort Hood, Texas. Upon arrival, I was deployed over to Tikrit, Iraq. After that, I redeployed and I deployed again, right back to Baghdad. And during that time, I was issued these 3M earplugs. I took these earplugs with my soldiers. We went out to the range and we fired and qualified on our M4 weapons. We took them over with us to Iraq, and while serving in Baghdad with all the loud noises that are going on, we wore those earplugs and we trusted that the 3M company was providing us with good equipment. If I seem passionate about this issue, it's because I am. It's because I have soldiers who suffer from this, who called me and said, hey, Lieutenant Cobos, now I have tinnitus and I heard you were working on this lawsuit. Okay, I got classmates from West Point who call on me and say, hey, Cobos, I can't believe that 3M did this to us. How can we be a part of this? Okay, I myself wore those earplugs in combat. I myself get ringing in my ears from time to time. Not nearly as bad as a lot of these soldiers that I've talked to, but it's there. And I use those earplugs, and I went to the firing range depending on those earplugs. And there's a lot of attorneys, and I don't want to point fingers at my fellow attorneys, because there's a lot of people out there who are doing good. But there's a lot of attorneys around this country who are just signing up these cases because it is the latest mass tort. And they're consolidating them, and they're referring them, and they're doing all sorts of stuff, and that's, you know, sometimes what you get. But this is a case that my law firm is going to stick on throughout the remainder of the case. Okay, these are relationships that I had well before this lawsuit ever started. These are relationships that I'm going to have for the remainder of my life. And I view it as my duty to do right by my soldiers. And I view it as my duty to do right by those service members who relied on their officers in combat. And yeah, we're not in a combat situation. We're not dodging bullets. And yet we're still here in a fight against an enemy with an objective. And that enemy is done wrong. And it's up to folks like those soldiers out there to hold them accountable. And 3M, I guarantee this: you have never gone up against a force like the U.S. military fighting force. You've never gone up against that force. And that's the force that's coming after you.